Mount Everest is changing faster than at any point in its commercial history. By 2027, the mountain will be operating under conditions, gears, and cultural realities that the previous decade would not have recognized. In a single calendar year, 4 climbers summited Mount Everest in less than a week. The Khumbu Icefall, the most dangerous section of the climb, had to be rerouted twice as the glacier melted faster than the climbing season could accommodate. A 1,400-pound block of frozen waste was lifted off the South Col by helicopter. And a generation of Sherpa children who grew up watching their fathers climb is now leaving the Khumbu for university degrees and jobs in Australia. These are the changes that, by 2027, will leave Mount Everest unrecognizable. To understand what Mount Everest will look like in 2027, you have to look at the 5 changes already in motion. 1. The xenon gas will become the standard product. In the spring of 2025, the Austrian guide Lucas Furtenbach took 4 British clients up Mount Everest in less than 5 days, beginning at their homes in the United Kingdom. The clients had inhaled xenon gas in a clinic in Germany 2 weeks before the climb. The gas, used in combination with hypoxic tents and supplemental oxygen at altitude, was credited with accelerating their body's production of red blood cells, bypassing the multi-week acclimatization that has been the structural reality of every Everest expedition since the first ascent in 1953. The price was $150,000. The expedition compressed a 2-month commitment into a 1-week trip. The climbing community's response was loud and divided. Dr. Peter Hackett, a high-altitude researcher at the University of Colorado, told CBC News that there was no science to confirm xenon worked at high altitude, and no science to confirm that it did not. Dr. Rob Casserly, a British climber and physician who has summited Everest 8 times, expressed concern about the psychological risks of skipping the traditional acclimatization period that has always given climbers time to confront the scale of what they were about to attempt. By the 2026 season, Furtenbach was offering the Xenon Accelerated Climb as a returning product. Other operators were quietly studying the model. By 2027, the 1-week Everest climb will no longer be an experiment. It will be a category. The price will fall as more operators offer it. The clients who buy it will spend less time on the mountain than the Sherpas who guide them spend setting up the heated tents at base camp. What this will mean for the meaning of climbing Mount Everest is the conversation the next year of the industry will be forced to have. 2. The Khumbu Icefall is becoming unclimbable. In April 2026, the Icefall doctors, the Sherpa team that fixes the route through the most dangerous section of Mount Everest at the start of every season, could not get the route open on schedule. In 2025, the Icefall had been fixed by April 10th. In 2026, the work was not complete until April 26th. The team was forced to abandon the standard line and search for a new route through ice that had become structurally unstable in conditions the senior Icefall doctors said they had never encountered. The Khumbu Glacier is retreating at an average of 65 feet per year, according to research by the International Center for Integrated Mountain Development. The South Col Glacier, Everest's highest, sitting at roughly 8,000 meters, has lost approximately 1/3 of its ice in the last 2 to 3 decades, according to research led by glaciologist Paul Majewski. The walls of the Icefall, which the Sherpas have been negotiating with for 70 years, no longer hold their shape from one season to the next. The ladders that used to span crevasses now sag or fall as the ice beneath them moves. In the same April, the 2026 week, that the Icefall doctors were searching for a new route, climbers at base camp found something they had not expected. Human remains had emerged from the ice at 5,300 meters. Bones, teeth, a torso. A climber, lost decades earlier, somewhere higher on the mountain, had been carried slowly downward by the moving glacier and was now visible above the surface. The bodies that the mountain had been holding for 30 years were being returned. Adrian Bollinger, the founder of Alpenglow Expeditions, has been moving expeditions to the Tibet side specifically because the Khumbu Icefall has become too unstable to commercially justify. In the last decade, he told Climbing Magazine, there has been approximately 1 Sherpa fatality on the north side of Everest. There have been close to 30 on the south side. The disparity, he said, is not even close. By 2027, the central question will no longer be whether climate change is affecting the Khumbu Icefall. The question will be whether the standard route through the icefall is still viable as a commercial corridor. If it is not, every expedition will be forced to either move to the Tibet side, which China has periodically closed without explanation, or accept that the world's most famous climbing route is being slowly retired by the same forces reshaping every other glacier on Earth. The mountain is still the mountain. The route up, it is not the route it was. 3. Drones are beginning to replace the Sherpas in the icefall. In the same 2025 season that introduced the Xenon climb, a Nepali company called Airlift Technology began flying cargo drones above the Khumbu Icefall. The drones could carry ladders, ropes, oxygen cylinders, and medical equipment from base camp at 17,500 feet up to Camp 1 at 20,000 feet. And they could bring garbage and human waste back down. Each flight took approximately 12 minutes. The icefall, which the drones were now skipping, has historically claimed the lives of roughly 1 out of every 4 Sherpas lost on the Nepal side of Mount Everest. In 2023, 3 Sherpa mountain workers were lost when an ice tower collapsed on them. In every season since the modern commercial era began, Sherpas have made dozens of crossings of the icefall while their clients made one, fixing the ladders, hauling the supplies, and absorbing the disproportionate share of the risk that the climbing industry has built itself around. The drones on paper eliminated the need for most of those crossings. The Sherpa community was divided. Mingma Wangchu, Sherpa, the operator of Himalayan Sherpa Adventure, told Outside Magazine that he genuinely valued the technology because every evening when his Sherpas left for the icefall, it was emotionally difficult for him to watch them go. In 2026, the U.S. Embassy partnered with Airlift Technology and brought the American ambassador, Sergio Gore, to base camp to promote the technology. Then the Nepali government canceled the cargo drone operations for political and regulatory reasons that have still not been fully explained. Then a modified version of the program was reinstated. The negotiation continues. By 2027, the drone question will have an answer. Either the drones will become a permanent fixture on Mount Everest, replacing the majority of icefall crossings and fundamentally restructuring the Sherpa labor economy, or the government will succeed in restricting them, preserving the existing labor system at the cost of the lives the drones were meant to save. The outcome will determine what kind of work the next generation of Sherpas does, and what kind of risk they continue to absorb. 4. The trash on Everest is becoming a permanent feature. The Sagarmatha Pollution Control Committee, the Sherpa-led nonprofit that has managed waste in the Everest region since the late 1990s, has been clear about the scale of the problem. During the 2024 spring season alone, the committee collected 85 tons of waste from Everest Base Camp. Expedition teams brought down another 10 tons from higher camps. And at the South Col, the last camp before the summit, an estimated 40 to 50 tons of garbage remains buried in the ice, accumulated over 70 years of expeditions. The Nepali government had a plan for this. Since 2014, every climber attempting Mount Everest had been required to pay a $4,000 deposit that would be refunded only if they returned to base camp with at least 8 kilograms of garbage. The deposit was supposed to create the incentive that would solve the problem. It did not. By late 2025, the Nepali government quietly scrapped the deposit refund program. The reason, per T-Sharing Sherpa, the chief executive officer of the SPCC, was structural. Climbers tended to bring trash down from the lower camps where it was easy to retrieve and easy to carry. But the high-altitude waste at Camps 3 and 4, the camps where the 8,000 meters of dead oxygen bottles, abandoned tents, and frozen waste actually live, was almost never touched. The average climber, Charing told the BBC, produces approximately 26 pounds of garbage during their time on the mountain. The deposit refunded them for less than that. In March 2026, the SPCC introduced a new rule. Climbers would now be required to bring back 2 kilograms of waste specifically from above Camp 2. A monitoring team would be stationed at Camp 2 to enforce the rule. It is the first time in the history of commercial Mount Everest that the regulatory pressure has been targeted at the actual location of the waste accumulation rather than at base camp. What the SPCC is asking the climbing community to acknowledge with this rule is something the industry has spent 30 years avoiding. The high-altitude trash on Mount Everest is not, in any practical sense, removable in bulk. Each removed ton requires Sherpas to make additional crossings of the icefall, additional ascents into the death zone, and additional risk to retrieve waste that has been frozen for decades. The cost of a complete cleanup in lives and labor may exceed what the industry is willing to commit. By 2027, the trash on Mount Everest will have been formally classified as something the industry has to manage rather than something it can remove. The new 2-kilogram rule will either work, or it will be quietly retired in the same way the $4,000 deposit was. Either outcome will confirm that the world's highest mountain is also one of the largest documented high-altitude waste sites on Earth. The cleanup, as currently structured, cannot keep pace with the accumulation. 5. The Sherpa generation is stepping off the mountain. In March 2026, Mingma Gyabu Sherpa, known to the climbing community as Mingma David, was sworn in as a member of Nepal's House of Representatives, representing the Rashtriya Swatantra Party. He was 36 years old. He held the Guinness World Record for the fastest ascent of Everest and K, 2 combined, completed in 61 days. He had been one of the 10 Nepali climbers who made the first winter ascent of K2 in 2021. In the same season, the climbing leader Mingma Gyalje Sherpa, known as Mingma G, led an open challenge to the official rope-fixing teams operated by the Sagarmatha Pollution Control Committee and the Expedition Operations Association of Nepal. The standard icefall route was delayed in 2026 because of unstable conditions, and Mingma G took it on himself to send a small team of Sherpas to find an alternate route through the blockage. They succeeded. The route they fixed was the one most of the season's clients eventually used. But the more consequential change is happening below the level of public visibility. The next generation of Sherpa children, the sons and daughters of the climbers who built the modern commercial era, is leaving the Khumbu. They are enrolling in universities in Kathmandu. They are taking jobs in Australia, the United States, and the United Kingdom. The traditional career pipeline that produced the icefall doctors, the high-altitude porters, and the climbing Sherpas is contracting. The cultural dimension of the change is harder to measure, but no less real. The Sherpa community has, for centuries, regarded Mount Everest as Chomo Lungma, the goddess mother of the world. The mountain is sacred. The act of climbing it for commercial reasons has always existed in tension with that reverence. As the new generation of Sherpa leaders enters politics, expedition leadership, and public criticism of the industry, that tension is becoming explicit. The mountain is sacred. The customer is paying. The two propositions can coexist only as long as the labor force is willing to hold them both. By 2027, the consequences of this generational shift will be visible across every dimension of the industry. More Sherpa leaders in elected office, more Sherpa-led expedition companies taking on the route-fixing work the official organizations have traditionally controlled, more Sherpa-owned drone operations, helicopter companies, and base camp infrastructure providers, and, most consequentially, fewer Sherpa workers available at the wage scale the industry has historically depended on. The labor force that built the modern Everest industry is, in 2027, becoming the management class of the next one. And the younger generation that would have replaced them at the labor floor is, in increasing numbers, choosing not to be on the mountain at all. The 5 changes named here are not predictions in the speculative sense. Each one is anchored to a verified 2026 event, a documented institutional decision, or a named person who is publicly committed to a course of action that will play out in the next year. By the spring of 2027, the xenon gas climb will be a standard product. The Khumbu Icefall will have either stabilized for one more season or required a 3rd consecutive rerouting. The drone question will have an answer. The high-altitude trash at the South Col will have either been measurably reduced under the new 2-kilogram rule or have remained where it has been for 30 years. And the Sherpa generation transition will have produced the first season in which the political class of the country includes more former climbing guides than at any point in Nepali history. What this will mean for the mountain itself is the harder question. The standard route through the Khumbu Icefall will still be dangerous, but possibly in different places than it used to be. The wage gap between the clients and the Sherpas will still be wide, but the labor force that absorbs it will be smaller. The weather windows will still be the limiting factor on most spring seasons, but the climate that produces them is no longer the climate that produced the post-1996 commercial era. The institutional architecture of Mount Everest, as the 2026 season made clear, is moving faster than it has at any point since the post-1996 reforms. Each of the 5 changes named here is, in its own way, an admission that the version of the industry that produced the queue at the bottleneck, the $8,000 Sherpa wage, the clients who did not make it back from the upper camps, and the $1 million luxury packages cannot continue without further pressure from inside and outside the climbing community. The 2027 Everest will be shaped by people whose names are already in the public record, by glaciers whose retreat is already measured, by waste whose accumulation is already documented, and by a generation whose movement away from the Khumbu is already underway. The mountain is still the mountain. Everything around it, on it, and inside it is becoming something new. Before you go, don't forget to check out the High Altitude Survival Guide in the description below. If this story stayed with you, subscribe and ring the bell, and tell us in the comments what you want Summit X to investigate next. The next forensic breakdown is already in progress,